Hey guys, it's Mike Madrid, author of the Latino Century. Check out the new audiobook version of my forthcoming book, read by Lee Osorio. It's going to be available June 18th, coming from Simon & Schuster Audiobooks. Check it out now.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Latino Vote podcast. Summer has sprung. That means that the leaves are turning here in Washington, D.C. And what I mean by turning, Mike Madrid, it means that they're turning into pollen. I don't know what y'all do out there in California, but over here on the left coast, we have pollen trees and bees.
Well, first, you're on the right coast, and second, it's spring that sprung, not summer.
Oh,
you're 6 days out of an election, so you got campaign fog.
I don't even know what day it is.
You probably haven't slept in a couple of weeks, so this is going to be a great podcast. I'm looking forward to this discussion.
Oh, my God. It's like I have not. Anyway, my whole schedule is screwed up because every morning, Mike, we have 4 early vote locations, and I have to get up at 4:30. That's an hour earlier than I normally do to go get my workout and to be back here to fix lunches for people, pack coolers, and then put 4 tents into my Jeep and then go set them up at each location, which includes her 83-year-old uncle who's mounting one, her 70-year-old mother who's manning the other one, an 18-year-old college kid whose daddy works with me at another one. Like, this is literally chewing gum and duct tape of holding this thing together over here.
I love that you're making sandwiches early in the morning after your workout, like going to bed packing sandwiches. Talk to us real quick before we get started. I'm interested in hearing, how does the vote center process work in the District of Columbia?
It's really, this is the first time in the history of DC outside of COVID where they mailed every registered Democrat a ballot.
Okay.
So they did that like 3 weeks ago. And then so people could mail those back in, or they've set up drop boxes around the ward. There's 5 or 6 in the ward, and they make that pretty easily accessible. And then a week before, which started this last Saturday, you could go in person and vote at an early vote location. Also in DC, they just started a new thing this year, Mike, where they've consolidated a lot of the small precincts and they've created vote centers where you can vote anywhere in the city. You don't have to vote in, like, you have to understand that. I'm trying to say this without downplaying the wonderful Democratic Party structure of cities, but like, it's literally been like in the Stone Ages, and it still is. Everything's PDF form. They don't put out list of who voted. I think I may have just gotten a list of who voted today, which is something that is like unheard of in this city. We filed a FOIA request. Like, Ebony Payne is going to win because we've run a modern campaign that me and you, Mike, have run forever in a campaign where we're doing multi-level communication over a long period of time to build somebody's name ID in an open race where nobody was an incumbent. And so figuring out who's voted and where they voted has been a big part of this. And right now we're on track to be about the same turnout or a little bit more than there was here in 22. When there was a big mayor's race. This is kind of the off year of when this ward is up, when the mayor's not on the ballot. And there's really, Mike, nothing on the ballot. The presidential's on the ballot, but it's Joe Biden. It's in the middle. Yeah. So that's what I'm looking at.
That's pretty good then. If you're getting a higher turnout in that kind of an environment, that's a good sign, right?
It is. It's a little bit higher, and we'll see, because there's 10 people. So you have 10 different camps trying to get their neighborhoods out, which I think will have some impact. Because not everybody is a top tier based off of money, because we have public financing. Some folks didn't qualify and they just never really raised much money, but they have their own neighborhood friends who will show up who normally don't vote. Like, oh, Skip Joe down the road is running. We should go vote for him. Roscoe down the street, you know.
And so how does it feel? Like 6 days out? I mean, I know we've done a million campaigns ourselves, but how does it feel to have somebody so close to you being running for office? And what's going through your mind?
It's a pain in my ass is what it is, because normally me and you can separate our work from our personal lives. Yeah. And I work really hard to try to keep my weekends free when me and Ebony are together, and I work around the clock, and everybody knows I've got a crazy schedule, and we talk about it on this podcast. But on the weekends, I'm on my phone and I'm working. If you text me about the podcast, me and you'll talk for sure. Yeah. But I tried to keep the weekends where we could go hiking. We may do some fishing, go do something else, whatever. But this has been nonstop, 7 days a week, round the clock now for a solid 6 months without a day off. And that's fine. I'm used to not having days off, but you can normally separate yourself from your clients. Yeah. And every night I have to share a bed with mine. Yeah. And so when she leans over and looks at you with those doe eyes, and it's like, are we going to win? How do you think we're really doing?
Yeah.
And I'm like, holy shit. I'm like, because you don't want to lose, A, but then B, you don't want to let down the woman you love or the person you love. And so I've been really, really good about saying, look, baby, I'm not going to sit here and tell you what you want to hear. We could be up 10, we could be down 10. And I'm going to tell you what we tell all of our clients. You got to trust the system when you have no polling.
Yeah.
And you just got to trust that I know what I'm doing. Blind. And so it's separating that has been a big part of like, you should know that I know how to run a campaign. We all know that you know how to run a campaign. I've got enough IDs today to win. Now, if they will turn out is what I'm working on right now.
Okay. So, and I think that's probably the cool thing about this. I'm glad we've been exploring this on the podcast through the journey here, because you are doing something at a higher level than most folks are in your race. It's a more sophisticated operation, right? And we're going to see how this breaks. We got to remember, I mean, in a democracy, anything can happen, man. 6-way race, 10-way race. What are you guys looking at? 10-way race. I mean, it's like predicting the Kentucky Derby.
Winner take all, Mike. No runoff.
Winner take all, man.
Somebody's going to win this race with 18% of the vote.
It's amazing. Well, I'm excited to hear how this sounds. We're going to do a podcast afterwards where I'm going to break down the precincts and the number, and I'm going to explain how Ebony Payne won, because it's going to be a masterclass in local politics. Perfect. Got it episode.
Well, Mike, I wanted to talk this morning about my favorite state outside of Ward 7 in the District of Columbia, which is the great Lone Star State, Texas, because there's been a lot of stuff going on in my home state with runoffs and elections and what's not. Last night, we're recording this on a Wednesday, like we try to do early in the morning, while Mike's still having his coffee, like literally as the sun's coming up in California. Last night, there were runoff elections in Texas. Unlike Ward 7 in Washington, D.C., if you don't get to 50% in a Texas primary, you have a runoff. And in the runoff, winner take all, it's down to the top two. The first race I want to talk about, Mike, and get your thoughts on, is our favorite congressional seat in Texas 23. That's where our buddy Tony Gonzales lives, right outside of San Antonio. And for everybody at home, this is kind of the western San Antonio suburbs, a real red part of what's left of San Antonio. Exurbs, what Mike likes to talk about, the suburbs where folks have moved out of the city, out into their luxury homes. And then it goes into some of the poorest areas, connecting that community to the border all the way up to the south side of El Paso. And El Paso proper is in this congressional seat. Now, Tony Gonzales had voted for impeachment. He was one of the folks who've been really giving the Republican Party a lot of shit. His own party.
Tony's Republican.
And Tony's Republican.
Yeah.
I should say that. All I want to let you know, Mike, and then I want to hear your thoughts, is the election results last night. Tony Gonzales wins, but he wins by a hair. Right. He wins by less than 400 votes as we're speaking right now. He has called victory. And this is the part I'll leave you. This is the Latino Vote podcast. So this was a Latino on Latino primary, both Republicans in a Republican runoff in probably an R+5 seat. And he beat Brandon, the AK guy, Herrera, who they have in the paper this morning is a YouTuber gun advocate, solely backed by Donald Trump and the MAGA party, who almost knocked off an incumbent congressman last night in a runoff by less than 400 votes. Take it away, Mike Madrid.
Well, there's nothing better than Latino Republican on Latino Republican violence in American politics. So to see that kind of a challenge happening is actually, let's start there at the 30,000 foot level. First of all, I mean, when have you ever reported on a Latino Republican primary anywhere in the country and make it newsworthy enough to actually have to pay attention? That's significant enough. The second is the district that you're talking about. That's like Bexar County, right? That's like the Bexar County down towards the border region, rural red, where a lot of the shit that's happening up, and then El Paso, where a lot of the
hey, Mike.
Yeah.
Just to remind everybody, Uvalde is in this district.
Uvalde's district. So there's a lot going on in this district, and it's pretty expansive. There's a lot of dynamics. And to see a challenge to a sitting Republican congressman of any ethnicity running on an extreme gun issue in Uvalde, with Uvalde in that area and surrounding areas, I don't care if it's Texas. I don't care where it's at. That's kind of extraordinary in and of itself. And then to have the president, former president of the United States, weigh in, make an endorsement, and lose, I think is something. It's something. What it tells me, let me say this. I don't know if this is the best analysis. This is the way I'm going to choose. This is the way I'm going to choose to see this, is that Donald Trump and those extreme elements can be beaten even in the reddest areas of Texas. Tony Gonzales, say what you will about him, he's kind of all over the place. But he does give the GOP conference some heartburn on a whole host of issues. But it might be that independence that is what saved him. Regardless, I am increasingly fascinated by the fact that you have two Latinos in a GOP primary focusing so much national attention, with one being more extreme than the other and getting Trump's endorsement and being the losing candidate, even by such a small sliver. It's good to see Trump candidates lose. It's never a bad day when Trump candidates lose. And this mystical hold he supposedly has over Latino voters, even Latino Republican voters, obviously did not bear fruit for him. So again, that might be me looking through rose-colored glasses, but you know Texas better. What do you make of it all?
I make that you never mentioned that he was also known as the AK guy. That's what I noticed, the AK guy. And he's a YouTuber. What am I doing with my life when there's some guy that's called the AK guy, whether he's Democrat, Republican? He's just crazy if he's on making money on YouTube. And then doing it in a place where Uvalde. Anyway, I digress and say that, look, a guy named Brandon Herrera, a guy named Tony Gonzales, and I guarantee you there's 500 Tony Gonzaleses in Texas 23, one of the most common names in Texas. And, Tony Gonzales, I'll give Republicans credit and him credit on this, is that, Tony Gonzales is one of those Mike Madrid Latino Republicans in Congress who's like, no. We can talk about fixing the border, but fixing the system too. Immigration is a good thing for our country.
Yeah.
But we can do it in a safe way, but we can do it also without demagoguing Latinos and Hispanics that are trying, like Tony has said that. That's, to be honest, why his party hates him. A lot of them hate him.
Yeah.
Not to mention that he was on CNN when he called Matt Gaetz an idiot. Mm-hmm. Remember he did that and pissed off a lot of people?
He is kind of a Mike Madrid Republican, isn't he?
Yeah. He speaks his mind. Is kind of pro-immigration if we do it in the right way. Like all the things, just don't talk shit about our community. So this seat is going to be an interesting seat to watch. It should be a safe Republican seat, but there's going to be another Latino Democrat running here. And so where do these MAGA Republicans go that vote in this primary? Like, this is what we've been looking at around the country. Like, we don't know what happens. And there's another person running, I forgot his name, but he's a Latino and he's Democrat. Anyway, before we get to some of the things that you want to talk about, Mike, while we stay in Texas, I want to get your thoughts on one more thing.
Yeah.
Is that the governor in Texas had called a special session for one cycle after another, trying hard to get vouchers passed through the state house. And then there was the whole attorney general trying to be recalled, and there was a trial over Ken Paxton. Remember all this? So there's been all of this, again, Republican on Republican fighting at the state house and state senate in Texas. Now, I tell you that really quickly to say that the governor went out of his way, which is really crazy, with Donald Trump, to go after a whole bunch of these Republican House members who would not vote for vouchers. And what you have is a bunch of rural Republicans who don't want to have vouchers because the rural school system where they are is really good. Most folks that are pro-vouchers, and I'm not here to espouse one way or the other, in urban areas where it's really poor, you can get black Democrats to vote for vouchers because they want the kids to be able to go to good schools. Well, these rural Republicans is really what stopped this, with a coalition of rural Democrats. And Mike's smiling because he's seen this 100 times probably in California. But let me just say my go-to line and then throw it to you, Mike, is of the 8 Republican runoff anti-school voucher folks, Donald Trump and the governor beat 6 of them last night. Now, the speaker survived. He was in a runoff, but by only less than 100 votes out of 25,000.
Wow.
The speaker almost gets beat, but 6 of his members got beat last night. And now this morning, the mayor's already saying, we did what we needed to do. Now we have enough votes for vouchers.
So, Chuck, okay, break this down for us. I mean, you know the ground they're better than. That's surely I do. They're surely the most. Is this about Trump or is this about issues? Well, you got a lot of these close races where Republican incumbents are either losing, like you said, by big numbers, or holding on by the skin of their teeth. Trump is weighing in Texas Republican primaries, which I think is a bad tactical move to begin with, but set that aside. Is this Trump? Is it a referendum on Trump, or is it about, the AK guy against Gonzales? And is it about school vouchers with these other GOP politicians?
I think it's not being Republican enough. And in some cases, it was absolutely Trump. Do you remember the African-American woman from Texas who was Trump's spokesman in the first race, Katrina Pearson, who was on TV?
She won, right?
She won last night. She beat somebody in a suburban Dallas County, which is, old school.
Suburbia.
Yeah. And so that's about Trump. That's about Republicans saying you're not Trumpy enough.
Yeah.
But in like rural West Texas, I think it's more around like it's money, some issues, but I don't think it's one size fits all.
But why do I think that's good for the country when Trump is weighing in and barely winning a lot of these seats and losing some in Texas?
Right. No, that's a great point.
He's not delivering Republicans by 80% plus. That's a sign of weakness. That's not a sign of strength. Granted, he's winning most, but you would expect that. And
it's Republicans on Republicans.
It's Republicans on, but that's what I'm saying. And to me, this is just another indicator of what you're seeing.
Oh, I know what you're going to say.
With this Nikki Haley problem.
Yep. I knew you were going to go there.
Nikki Haley, even though she's dropped out of the race, continues to get 20% of the Republican vote. By the way, last round of primaries is June 4th. So we'll do a podcast on that too, and we'll test Madrid's theory here. But let's just look at the data here. If you've got Nikki Haley, who dropped out of the race, still getting 20% of the Republican base vote.
Mm-hmm.
You got Trump weighing in ruby red Texas legislative districts and winning most, but not all. And in most cases, these victories are close races, or the losses are close races. He's splitting Republican Texas primaries 50-50. He's not delivering the way that he used to. He's just not. And I'm not saying that he isn't winning. He is winning. But the margins matter heading into a November race. And Trump is not, all the data, at least on the ground, and this can change by November, but everything since the 2022 midterms is showing he's not producing in Republican districts the way that he used to. He's not at his best. And in fact, he's at his low point right now in terms of actually delivering the Republican base vote. I think that's a warning sign. I think that's a problem for him.
I never really thought about it in that texture. Obviously, me and you think about things differently. We normally get to the same result. But that doesn't make a good point. Now, will there be Donald Trump ain't never going to lose Texas. But to Mike Madrid's point, why is Donald Trump not winning Texas by 90%, 95%? 98. And there's going to be other races. There's marginal races in the Valley, in Texas, 15. There's, Colin Allred is raising a bazillion. I love that word, $1 bazillion against Ted Cruz. Mm-hmm. It'll be tough for him to win, but he's going to run a real if you've got $20 million to spend in Texas, you're going to run somewhat of a real race, right? So I think all of these margins, these rural Republicans, let's hear what we haven't talked about, and then we'll move to the next topic. But in these rural areas, Mike, there's no Democratic Party. There's no pushback. Well, there's nothing there. Where the speaker was in Beaumont, Texas, there used to be a party there in the 90s. But again, they've been drained of money and resources. They fight a good battle, but it's not like the infrastructure that Republicans have. And them going after each other, to your point, I think weakens the brand. And what happens, and we don't know, me and you can pontificate, there we go again, my big words, about what happens after Donald Trump. What does the party look like afterwards? That's probably going to be your second book.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, I don't know if I want to weigh into this because it's going to be wild. We're going to find out either way. But look, I think, again, I'm just going to stick on that thread line, and I'm not going to elaborate too much. Let's move on to topics. But we're going to look at June 4th. It's going to tell us a lot about, it's going to give us a clean data, clean look, as I like to say, with Haley clearly out of this race. She's in the rearview mirror. These voters, these Republican voters, are not delivering for Donald Trump, no matter how you slice it, whether it's him directly in a primary or whether it's his endorsed candidates. He is not the dominant figure that he once was. He's still winning the race, but the margins aren't there, and you can see it on the ground, even if you can't see it in the polls.
So, Mike, I know that you had read something that you had come out this morning, and I want to hear about the Brownstein piece you were looking at.
Yeah, there's a great article today on CNN by Ron Brownstein, where he talks to a Democratic strategist pollster by the name of Tom Bonnier. And what Tom is pointing out, and I've had these conversations, I think you and I have talked about it a little bit, is the question as to whether or not Democrats still benefit from high turnout elections. And this is a really formative question when you're approaching campaigns because of the Latino vote. And the thesis is essentially this: if this shift of younger Latinos is not as strong for the Democrats as it used to be, does creating all these turnout operations actually help you get when the margins that you used to get 70%, 75% plus the margins of just turning out voters? Is that still a good strategy if you're only getting 50% or 55% of the vote? And that's a real question. And the point I wanted to make here in bringing this out was, as the parties' coalitions change, as the education divide continues to define or redefine the contours of both parties, contours, that's CONTOURS.
I have no idea what that means. I have no idea.
But if you look at the different contours of the parties, you are seeing more and more the defection of more and more Republican women, college-educated women from these burbs that we're talking about, moving towards the Democratic Party. And that here's the thing that nobody talks about with this group, and that is this. These women have been leaving the GOP since 2016. They split in 2016. They wouldn't vote for Trump. They voted down ticket for the Republicans. In 2018, they voted overwhelmingly to give Nancy Pelosi the speaker gavel. In 2020, they voted for Joe Biden up top, the Republicans down below. In 2022, after Dobbs, they voted for the Democratic Party. These Republicans are not re-registering, but they are voting. In 4 of the last 5 elections, that's the beginnings of a realignment. These women, they're Democrats. They just don't really know it yet. They're not comfortable saying that, but they're voting for Democrats consistently for almost a decade now. That's a big deal. Now, conversely, I think you have Latinos doing the same thing at the bottom of the pyramid. Is Latinos are saying, the non-college educated Hispanic men, they may or may not be registered as Republicans, but the performance of Republicans in these districts is getting bigger and bigger and bigger. But it's a lower information, lower propensity, lower turnout voter. So does it make sense for the Democratic Party to turn out these voters if the margin you're getting is 15, 18 points lower than it was a decade ago or 15 years ago? And my arguments to Brownstein when I spoke to him, and I want your thoughts on this because there's nobody who's done Latino turnout better than you all over the country. But my argument was the problem that Trump has is he does get a higher turnout of these voters, but he's also turns off those women at the top for the same reason. So he's kind of stuck. Remember, in 2020, we had the highest voter turnout in the history of the country, and Donald Trump loses. But the Republicans pick up seats, which means on the ground, a lot of these low propensity, lower information voters are voting more Republican. And that's what all the polling data that shows Joe Biden in trouble, that's what all the polling is showing, is lower propensity, younger Black and brown men. 1 of 3, 2 of 4 voters are voting for or more likely to vote for Donald Trump. If we have a low turnout election, it seems to be that that's going to benefit Joe Biden. So what do you do if you're the Democrats? Do you continue to just put down the GOTV operation that you had in Hispanic dense precincts and hope you're not turning out Republican voters? I mean, how are you approaching this job?
No, modern campaigns have changed a lot since me and you were kids. And if they're smart, and some people still use the old, like we going into precinct 101 and pushing out the vote. We keep going back to this Ward 7 race because I've gotten my hands dirty, as me and Mike have talked about. And so I'm back to the precinct level looking at data, Mike, and figuring out what's the highest percentage turnout precinct. There's a precinct here, precinct 101, that's voted 1,100 people. We call it the bougie Black neighborhood because we're all the rich Black folks live, and it's a damn nice neighborhood. And I wish this Mexican could afford to live there. But do you go up in there and knock on every door because they're all going to turn out, or you do a persuasion? Do you do an ID? Like, this is the thing that Democrats now, I think, will be doing. And I think about the inner city of Philadelphia and think about the Black vote there, that the machine, it's one of the old machine cities. And I remember Barack Obama really upsetting the apple cart there, because he wouldn't go in there with his quote unquote team and put street money in the streets of Philadelphia. And so this was a big FU to the local party structure, who was like, the vote won't turn out if you're not putting money in the streets. And me and Mike Madrid, in the old days, there was this money thing where you would put money in the streets the last few days of hiring lots of folks to knock and drag folks out, not knock them or hurt them, but knock on their door and drag them to the polls. And that's what it means by moving money around in the precincts. Some folks would pay off preachers back in the day, counsel this or that. Those days are behind us. And Barack Obama proved that when he didn't give money, and there was still historic turnout without the money. Now, I say that to say this about Donald Trump. I think Donald Trump is just like Barack Obama in a way that he motivates folks who are never going to be motivated by anybody else to be there.
Let's say it again.
I think that Donald Trump motivates lots of crazy people to show up at the damn polls. I ain't talking about black people.
Andreas, we're gonna use that clip right there. Donald Trump, just like
whatever.
Obama.
I preface this anyway, and I would also say that it doesn't cost that much. In the old days, it cost a lot of money to go in there and figure out who the ID is. But now we can ID everybody. And what that means is that old black woman and that old black man, that old Spanish-speaking Latina, your abuela and your grandfather, we know they're safe. But think about the young folks. And I think they have to have a lot more persuadable. If you were asking Chuck Rocha, I'd just be doing the persuadable audience to all of them, because there's no more GOTV universe. You have to go in and persuade over a longer period of time. I'll stop with this and throw it back to you. One great example of this is what's going on in Arizona. This morning, there was an announcement by Bold PAC, which is the nation's largest Hispanic caucus PAC, run by the Hispanic caucus here in Congress. They have a leadership PAC. It used to be chaired by our good friend, Tony Cardenas. It's now chaired by Linda Sanchez. They announced this morning that starting in June, this is the big thing here, two big things. One, starting in June in Arizona, they're dumping $1.1 million in one state of Arizona to try to elect Ruben Gallego with 6 weeks of Spanish radio in June and July. That's people, that could not be more crazy. That's like Chuck Rocha having hair and small feet. Like that just ain't going to happen. So this is something very different where folks are understanding we have to do something. It's not just GOTV anymore. We're going to go start talking to Latinos in Arizona in Spanish in June because nobody else is doing it. I see that being something very different.
I think it's a seismic shift, and I think it's great. I think it's a great tactic too. And it's hard to put in perspective how significant of a buy that is at any time, let alone at June. I can tell you that's never happened in Arizona before. That's basically saturation levels. That's like you can't turn on the radio. You might be hearing Ruben's voice with the radio off, by the way. That's like how much ad time you've got there. So one other thing I want to mention, Chuck, is check this out. Can you see this in the camera?
Ultra MAGA. That looks like a young Steve Garvey.
We got our Steve McGarvey baseball cards. Just to remind everybody that listens to the Latino Vote podcast that Steve Garvey is running on an Ultra MAGA platform here in California. We're going to make these available. I just got these in the mail yesterday. We'll do a little promo with these earlier, but we want to make these available to supporters of the Latino Vote podcast. So if you're giving us a subscribe, if you're giving us a review, if you're throwing us a couple of bucks to kind of keep Chuck's hair tonic purchased, then we're going to make sure that you get a Steve McGarvey baseball card in the mail. We'll tell you in just a second, but I want to give everybody a sneak preview because we're going to be pushing these out in just a little bit.
That's nice. I don't know if folks remember baseball cards because me and Mike are older than Methuselah, that you could get them at the drugstore for like 10 cents and it'd have a stick of gum in it. And the gum would be from 1945 because it'd be hard as a rock and been in there forever. But that's really cool. Steve McGarvey.
Yeah. And I can a little off topic from politics, but maybe not. Did you hear the news yesterday? Major League Baseball is going to be condensing the Negro League statistics with the overall, white guy statistics from back when baseball was segregated into one. So Josh Gibson has now overtaken Ty Cobb as the all-time American batting average leader in history. And we're going to see a lot of those Babe Ruth statistics fall to Josh Gibson and some of these other Negro League players. There's basically baseball is now, I think, completely integrated. I think it's pretty amazing, pretty awesome, kind of cool.
I watched that this morning, listened to it on the Morning Joe. They were talking about it. The old white guy from Boston who likes to follow the Boston Red Sox. And then they were talking about how he had automatically was number one in like 3 different categories. The Negro League in DC was called the Senators. And there is a night at the Washington Nationals where they celebrate, or a couple nights, the old jerseys. No, they were the Grays, not the Senators. They were the Grays. What a cool name, the Gray. In Ward 7, everything comes back to Ward 7. The incumbent who was retiring is named Vincent Gray. I don't think he was family named after it. But speaking of something that sounds like the Negro League, is our good buddy Robert De Niro was in New York yesterday giving Republicans all kinds of HE double hockey sticks. I just loved watching him mouth at the Trump guys. He'd walk by them and call them a bunch of fucking losers and then mouth about, "You're crazy. You're part of the problem." Now, a reporter sent me a message. He goes, what do you think about the Robert De Niro thing at the courthouse and him showing up with the spokesman, or I think it was like a communications director for Biden's campaign? And I'll tell this audience what I told them, which they probably won't print. And I was like, look, whether it's democracy, whether it's early voting, whatever it is when Democrats are standing up and trying to be tough and trying to push back, that's a good thing in my book. And I may not even always agree, but I think as a party, we take a lot of shit and don't stand up and puff our chest out and be like, no. This can call bullshit and and I don't mean that in some machismo way. Y'all can all relax. I mean that in a way of what I want to see my party fight back against anti-democracy, as Mike Madrid would say, like when he's trying to be a dictator, oligarch, I think is the word y'all use. I can't even say oligarch, but that's the thing we're pushing back on.
I like the fight. That's what I like. I just like the fact that you're seeing anti-Trump people walking into the lion's den and being just fearless about the approach. One of the biggest dynamics of Trumpism is this attempt to bully and paralyze people with fear, right? That's the biggest tool that the authoritarian has. And when you got people like De Niro or others just going straight up to him, wagging their finger at him and giving him hell, it takes that power away. It basically says, we're going to fight back too. And I think that's the most powerful thing about what De Niro did is like, you want to bring it? Come on, let's bring it. Let's have this out. Let's fight this out. Remember always, folks, there are more anti-Trump people than there are pro-Trump people. There always have been. They're
just not as loud, right?
They're not as loud. And remember that Biden and Hillary both won by historic levels of support by many millions of voters over the Trump forces. So I think that continues to be the case. There's no evidence to suggest that it's not. And it's just a matter of, a bully being a bully. Once you go and pop him in the jaw, a bully usually either backs down, or if he doesn't back down, at least it gives you the strength to stand up the next time and do it again. That's always been the concern I've had with Trump and Trumpism. I'm not worried about the extremists and the bullies. They will always be there. It's the cowardice of the enablers around him. And when you pop the bully in the face, those enablers stop and go, wait a second. This guy's not inevitable. I'm not going to cower and support him just because I'm afraid and I don't want to be a target of the bad guys, because there's a lot of that in Republican politics. I'd say most of it. And that's I think what's hopeful with what De Niro did. I'm not too sure that people vote for celebrities one way or the other, but it's good to see them engaging, because especially that way, by the way, it's not just some, removed, stage somewhere in the middle of 100,000 person audience. This is going into the streets of New York, going up to the guardrails and giving them hell. And I love it.
This was not held at the Four Seasons Landscaping Company.
Was not. This was actually at the location it was supposed to be at. So
Well, I think that's a good one to take us out on today. We'll get you back next week. There's going to be a whole bunch of stuff happening next week. I think we'll have a special recording. Is that right, Mike? Is that a special recording coming up next week? Will it be a regular episode?
I think it's going to be a regular episode. I haven't looked at the dates because, like you, it's all getting fuzzy and blurry.
You had told me next June, coming up like June 5th or 6th, we were going to have a recording maybe with a special guest.
Yes.
That's on the 5th.
Yeah. And again, if we do it on the 5th, that's also the day after the primary. So we will have a lot to talk about. So I think we're going to have some good stuff coming up. I know we're going to have some good stuff coming up.
Spanish radio, maybe.
And we got Spanish radio. That's exactly right. We got some TV appearances coming up, a little bit more than Chuck Rocha is used to. He's like Mr. TV now. He's more known than Walter Cronkite was in the 1970s. So the good news is Chuck's getting a lot of TV exposure. The bad news is the hair transplant, the hair plugs haven't fully kicked in yet. So he's got to use the cowboy hat a little bit. But until then, we will see you all next week. I'm going to take us out on our own, if that's okay.
That's nice.
Great talk. We'll talk to you all next week when we're going to talk about our Steve McGarvey baseball cards, special guest, and post-election analysis from the last of the primaries and what it means from here through November. We'll talk to you soon. Like, subscribe, share with your friends, bring them over for Latino Vote podcast, gathering parties, do what you got to do. Help us out, and we will talk to you next week.